Here we are. We're arriving at our top 5 albums. All right. Number 5, Jordan, number 5.
All right, so my number 5 top album of the year is going to be Ocean's 8 Alaska's Disparity. It's a very, very cohesive record. Like, it's definitely one of the best, album feeling albums this year. It's definitely got like a very clear beginning, middle, and end. I feel like them writing around the beats definitely kept everything very grounded. And keeps the songs very, there's not a lot of fluff to them. It's very focused on the songwriting, and it's very, very strong. Chris Turner just basically carries this album. The vocals definitely help carry this album too. There's a lot of really cool, catchy choruses on this, and they don't really follow the generic formula, which I definitely appreciate that this year, because there was a lot of generic sounding stuff. This also had the best breakdown of the year for me, with Plague Speech. That breakdown was
pretty nuts,
insane. So yeah, that's my number 5.
But yeah, Ocean's 8 Alaska was really good as well. So my number 5. So I am gonna have some on here that are gonna be very surprising for some people. I think some bands that you've probably never heard of, or you just flat out wouldn't expect me to just talk about. My number 5 is Within Destruction, Lotus. That album was very surprising for me. I've been a fan of them. They're just kind of, they're deathcore with like some interesting trap stuff in there, and some technical guitar work that I really like. They have really killer merch, so I've always like worn their merch and stuff. But this album was really a little bit different. They definitely blended a lot more melodic stuff in here. So it was a very interesting blend of, technical. I don't know if you would call it technical deathcore. But it's really technical guitar work with deathcore. Kind of like progressive. I guess you could call it like progressive deathcore. I guess maybe would be a more accurate description for it with the guitar work, because it feels like almost like it could be Genty if it really wanted to, Yeah. But anyways, with like some hints of melodic metalcore, and then with the trap inspired synth work weaved throughout the entire thing. The album is kind of a roller coaster of ups and downs. It does have a song on here that I flat out don't like, the Neo Yakuza.
Oh, yeah.
I feel really bad about saying that, because the band's probably gonna see this, maybe. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I just don't like that one song, but the rest of it, it's okay. It's still in my top 5. Like, that's how good the rest of the album is. It makes up for it with like some insane parts, such as that there's a song, the second to last one, I think, is like inhumanly fast double bass. There's like some really catchy upbeat choruses, and then you've got the absolutely killer, fucking beautifully melodic instrumental outro track, Ultima, which I was like, oh my god, just like listening to that, such a perfect outro for that album. And that song by itself pretty much gave the album an entire like higher rank. Like, that was so good, and I just love that. I hope they do more of that. So yeah, this album had some really great surprises that I wasn't suspecting. So Within Destruction, Lotus. There you go. Jordan, number 4.
All right, so my number 4 is gonna be Ultra by Vatican.
Mm-hmm.
Man, this album is just it's very, very cool. I don't really know how to like categorize it. I would say it's very Meshuggah-esque without being like a straight up, like gent Meshuggah copy. Like, kind of like Periphery gets kind of like the bad rap for being like that. It takes kind of like those progressive and like atmospheric and like very like heavy down tune like moments, and they kind of mix it with more of like the I don't want to even say metalcore, because it's very fast. There's not a lot of like repeating choruses or anything on like the very like heavy fast songs. So it's definitely got that vibe, but then also the other songs, very epic and like very surprising clean vocals on this, because they really didn't have a lot of that before. I feel like this album is just kind of like a step in the next direction for them. It's definitely way different than their older stuff, but they definitely killed it on this. You know, those really big choruses and like kind of like borderline emotional parts paired with like the electronics and like just like the huge sound on this album. It really has like a very cool mix of everything that you kind of love about more progressive metalcore and like heavy music. Almost kind of like an epic feel, kind of like Periphery has, without being like you know, like I said, just straight rip off like gent band, because it's not gent at all.
Yeah.
But it's definitely got those elements here and there. The drumming on this is very, very cool. The drums are really punchy on this. They're fast. They're going all over the place. The vocals, they're very varied. Like I said earlier, the guitar riffs are really cool and progressive. They're not playing just straight riffs and stuff all the time. They're really playing a lot with like weird sounds and like mixing in kind of more electronic sounding guitar parts that kind of have a cool juxtaposition with like the actual samples and electronics and stuff, and they kind of go back and forth in some of the songs. So I thought that was really cool. Also, another really good album closer, like I said, with Did You Ever Know I Was Gone, featuring the Iris EXE. That's just like a really, really good album closer. Like I said, album closers were a big point for me this year. A lot of the albums that didn't have a very good album closer, they didn't really make it far for me. There's definitely something more of just having like the complete feel whenever you're listening to it, and then it finally ends. You feel like it's definitely got some closure to it. You don't really want to feel like they just kind of left things open-ended. Just a really well-rounded album.
All right, my number 4, another surprise, another one that y'all will probably be like, who the fuck is this band? Mine was Stain the Canvas, the Stain the Canvas All Fine album. So this band is in a sea of bands that blend pop elements with metalcore / deathcore. You know, Bring Me the Horizon would be the first one to name. Bad Omens, that type of stuff. It's really in that camp. However, this band specifically has the perfect balance of those elements, because they don't forget that they're at their core a heavy band. They have those, you know, cheesy, you know, hip hoppy feeling moments that I'm usually normally not a fan of those type of bands, that type of vocal stuff. You know, I really kind of like the more emo sounding stuff, if you want to call it that. The way these guys do it, they blend it in such a way that it's just like there's so many more like heavy parts, and when they do the heavy parts, I mean, they get heavy. They have like he does like just some crazy screams that are just really so it's like just this a great blend that's just way better. I'm getting off track. I'm not even going off of what I've written down, so I'm sorry about that. So they utilize I'd say like the post-human, after Sempiternal, Bring Me the Horizon vocal harmonies, even like some Corpse Husband style vocals, if y'all know who Corpse Husband is. But at the same time, in those same songs, they have Count Your Blessings era Bring Me the Horizon, like high-pitched screams that are just like absolutely killer. Not to mention like their breakdowns. The breakdown on the track Puppet is actually one of my favorite melodies of a breakdown. Like it's like this really like eerie, which it's kind of fleeting. They only use it a couple times in that breakdown. I really wish they would have extended it. And I think I only gave the album like an 8 out of 10 or something, but still, like, I think just the way these guys blended those elements compared to other bands that we've listened to this year, which there's a whole lot of them, I think they did it just so much better, and they just make it so much more compelling when I don't normally like those type of pop elements. But so I think these guys deserve to be on my top 5 list. So they're my number 4. So Jordan, number 3.
Man, this album blew me the fuck away. Like, I was not expecting this to be as good as it was. This album, they really stepped it up. There's a lot of that old vein sound, but it's definitely a lot more streamlined than before. They just kind of go straight into the point. There's a lot of different like layers and samples again, but it's more of in the background and kind of mixed in with everything. There's a lot of clean singing on this. I was not expecting the clean singing on this. It's very close to like the cleans on Vatican, but it's definitely got a little bit more emotion. The kind of like layering and stuff that they do on this is very cool. There's not a lot of moments where like on the original debut album where it kind of like stops and like they have kind of like an electronic part. There's not a lot of that, but it's definitely more song focused. The album closer on this, man, it opens up with like this sample. It's like a phone call sample, and when that part came in, I literally started crying. I bawled. It was so emotional and like hard hitting for me. Like I don't know, I just fucking lost it, man. And then it kind of goes into like a just more of like a epic album closer with like some more clean vocals. Definitely a little bit more of like a shoegazy kind of Deftones feel. But man, I think that's probably the best album closer I've heard this year, man. Like I literally started bawling, dude. That shit was this album very highly recommend it.
That one I did not catch that one.
I think you would definitely like it.
All right. So my number three was the Vatican album, Ultra. Again, this album was very surprising to me. This album, it takes that angry early metalcore and evolve it with a lot of the very interesting electronic elements and sections. Having some very light touches of like clean vocals here and there, but without like shoving them in your face until the end, until the last track, which is this massive outro track that you just don't expect. Piano intro, just beautiful piano. You have this the female vocalist come in. She has a very like trancey, like she could be in like a trance techno song. She has that kind of just vocal range, and it's like this really pretty soft electronic song for like 2 minutes, and then it explodes into this just huge breakdown that just closes out the album in this like immense way. And it just like I think we were both like sitting there just like, wow, like what was that, like just totally not expecting it like on that first listen. And god, it just like, and like I remember that feeling. And then I went, in preparation for making my top 5 list, I went back and listened to a lot of these albums, and especially ones that I knew were, really good. And hearing that again, and I was just like, damn, that was so good. And it just really deserved it. It really deserved being on the top list. So, awesome job to Vatican for making it on both of our lists. But all right, number 2.
All right, so getting down to the nitty gritty, my number 2 is Burying Brightness by Boundaries.
This is also my number 2. It's also my number 2.
Like Vatican, it's very rooted in like the hardcore leaning metalcore.
Jordan, my first sentence here, much like the Vatican album, the album is very grounded in the aggressive, chaotic early metalcore sound. But
nice. Yeah, like I said, very 2000s inspired riffs and songs, without being completely derivative of just like this band or this band. They've got elements of Kill Switch. There's elements of like Misery Signal, Seven Angels, Seven Plagues, that kind of thing. Very melodic as well, coupled with like the very kind of like atmospheric parts that they throw in. It just kind of has everything a little bit more room to breathe and kind of room to sit and think, especially with these very emotionally charged lyrics. Like these lyrics are like very hard hitting, and they're very like relatable without going into like the cliches like too much. A lot of the lyrics feel more like poems, and like kind of like short stories, and
especially with like the spoken word like section in there and stuff too.
Yeah, more kind of like more of just like written as like thoughts, and kind of like you're writing a letter. It kind of feels like that. There's a lot of just, like really cool song structures that they play with on this. There's some songs where they kind of like have like breakdown choruses that are just kind of like come out of nowhere, but they're very well placed in the songs, and I think they fit. Yeah, I think especially on Heaven's Broken Heart. Um, I feel like this album beat out Vane for me just a little bit more, just because the emotion was very densely packed in this. Um, a lot of the songs felt very, very emotional, and they hit very hard. Um, Not like Vane, where it's just a couple of those parts. This is very like it's got a lot more of that, so it definitely beat them out for me. But yeah, I think this album was very, very cool. Definitely, if you haven't listened to it, go and check it out.
Yep. So yeah, also my number 2, Boundaries, Bearing Brightness. So what I've got here is much like the Vatican album, this album is very grounded in the aggressive, chaotic early metalcore sound, but instead of the electronic elements that Vatican has, Boundaries leans towards like implementing the melodic hardcore instrumental moments, a la Counterparts, Misery Signals, but they don't really push too hard into it. They're just like kind of they're just like little mixed in there. It's not they don't. It's still very heavy and angry, all in one. And of course, they add the truly emotionally impactful and relatable dark lyrics. It just creates this massive, like, sounding, hard hitting, both sonically and psychologically album. Like, it's just very, like when I was sitting there reading the lyrics along with it, I was like, oh my god, like this is like some like this is just heavy. Like it hits you. And the way he just vocalizes it is just perfect, and then of course they have the big sounding choruses too that just leave you with the urge to see this live, and be able to pile on and just sing with the fucking crowd. I think this is a perfect album for that. Not to mention, you didn't mention the fun Amur style secret track at the end of the album.
Yeah, I didn't want to mention it just for anybody that hasn't heard it, but yeah.
Yeah, it's
man,
nice
go listen
cherry,
to that.
nice little cherry on top. But yeah, just an absolutely like huge album. Definitely go listen to it. If you listen to it, read the lyrics because they're huge. I think the way you put it, this is like writing a letter. It's literally what it is. Like, it's very deep thought type stuff. All right, number one.
All right, so my number one
Devil Wears Prada!
Not Devil Wears Prada. It's Rouge Carpet Disaster by Static Dress. This is another super, super emotional album. It's more rooted in like the older post-hardcore and kind of emo genre, but they also don't just straight play with that. They kind of mix in a lot of other influences like shoegaze. They kind of got like Deftones-y, Loathe type parts on this. There's like some cool piano and like violin stuff. There's a lot of cool electronics on this album as well. It's kind of like mixed in with kind of like the chaotic moments, and they kind of just blended in, and there's a lot of like atmosphere like Boundaries and Counterparts, but this just had a little bit more emotional impact for me. The lyrics were just very, very relatable, but also without being too cliche. They don't really fall into those those things that a lot of old post-hardcore and emo can kind of go into, but they still have that overall sound. Just had a little bit more of like a kind of a unique identity. There's not really a lot of other bands that sound like this right now. There's still like the older bands that have still kept around, like Silverstein and Under Oath, but a lot of those bands have actually kind of moved away from that sound. So this is kind of a little bit more of a breath of fresh air for what's out there. Very emotional album for me, but it's also very fun. There's like some really cool like upbeat moments. There's a lot of like kind of like slow chill moments, like I said. Also another great album closer. They just like kind of like went real epic with it, and then like they had like the whole part at the end, and like the samples that they kind of like layered in there and stuff. So yeah, it's definitely really, really cool record.
Plus, I got the whole
was,
like concept thing going on too there too.
yeah, and I feel like this is probably the best concept album that I've heard, this year. There's actually been quite a few of them this year, but I feel like this one just has the right length and the right amount of hidden things in there that you can kind of like go, and every time you listen to it, you can hear like a new sample or something in the background that you haven't heard, and it just kind of keeps kind of like a whole world, and it feels kind of like an actual, events that are actually happening. Really, really cool. So that's my number one for this year.
All right. So my number one, another surprise, another band you're probably, who the fuck is that? My number one is Dreamwake Virtual Reality. This one came out way earlier this year. It is, so if you haven't heard it, progressive metalcore, it's fairly normal, era style progressive metalcore, but these guys also have some slight synthwave elements as well. There's a lot of synth throughout the songs. There's even saxophone in like one or two of the songs, which is like just really great. There's some nice solos. So this album, technically, they don't really do anything specifically out of the box, aside from this little synthwave stuff. But why is it my number one? Like, I really can't explain it. There's just something about this album. It's just one of those albums that just like keeps calling me back to it. Like, I just go and listen to it. It's an easy listen, I guess you could say, but it's also like it doesn't take itself too seriously. But at the same time, like if you dive into it, if you feel like diving into it, the lyrics are very personal and emotional lyrics. So it's got everything. It's got something, for everyone if you want. They have heavy breakdowns. Not too many of them. There's only a few, but there's really nice two steps. There's really nice choruses. Some great like unique clean singing in there. There's just if you like progressive metalcore, this is like the perfect like style of it, I think. There's like insanely catchy guitar riffs, vocal harmonies, and being my number one, I will say I can't call this album a 10 out of 10. It's not. The synthwave elements, it's very, if you watch their videos, they really play into the synthwave, but sonically, I think the synthwave is kind of a tease. They really don't embellish on it. It's usually a lot of like the intro stuff, into the tracks and stuff, and maybe a little bit in the background. I would really like to see them push that harder. I would really like to see the vocalist branch out, his like scream range, because he really kind of does one kind of scream until like the last track he varies it just a little bit more. He puts a little bit more motion into it. I would like to see them spread that a little bit more, but like still, there's just something about it that's just like really bright and special about the album. I don't know what it is. It just I just love putting it on and just jamming out to it. It's got groove, it's got bounce, you just sit there and you're just fucking jamming out. It's just something special about it that I just really like. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but it still has those emotional, engaging lyrics with a ton of groove, and that's something that I really look for in an album is that. And so that's why it's my number one. Like I said, it's not perfect, but it's like perfect for me. And I think this is a band that I think could really blow up if they really push into that. Especially like I said with the synthwave, really set themselves apart. But I think it's a great fucking album. But yeah, so that's our albums of the year.